Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths, a program that's devoted to the fastest growing segment of our society. To those of you like me who know that there is something troubling, even destructive, about institutions like religion and politics, media reporting, military invasions, and economic schemes. We realize that these institutions are part of the problem. They are not the solution. So instead of merely presenting the news, our mission here is to understand what is occurring behind the headlines, what is causing the tragedies that are besieging our planet, while predicting how these events will influence our world if we don't stand up to them. Now, typically in our second hour, we would then transition to God and engage Him on His terms with evidence and reason. But we're going to do that in the first hour today because our good friend, al-Rassooli, has returned from his much-deserved vacation. And with IQ back, we will focus on the terrible tragedies that are unfolding throughout the Islamic world, but particularly in Egypt, and discuss what that all means to us. Words, wielded wisely, provide the answer for everything that ails us, from economic ruin to terrorism, from religious myths to political hypocrisy. Our phone number, if you would like to wield your words wisely and participate in this program, toll-free, 877-300-7645. Each day as I prepare another 2 hours to spend with you, I'm always faced with the same challenge, the same question. It is the question that is addressed in the statement that we have considered from Yahowah these last 2 days, but it is the dilemma as to whether or not what we're doing has the opportunity to significantly change the fate of a significant number of lives. Now, what we have done has already brought many people out of religion, out of politics, and has taken many of those toward the answers that have introduced them to God Himself. And they have formed a covenant relationship with God. So it has absolutely been worth the effort. But in terms of broadly making a difference, it's this single concept, a battle lines between the institutions of this world and what God is offering, that I stand on the precipice of. This is the fulcrum of whether or not we can make a difference over a significant number of people. It's a single word, Nisama. You know, I recognize that our first hour, where we systematically expose and condemn the military misadventures of our nation, the economic foibles of our nation, the political hypocrisy of our nation, and the religious lies that are being pontificated by clerics, that there are plenty of people who have come to the realization that the problems exist, they are real, and that all we are doing is affirming what they know to be true. The next challenge, however, is to encourage those same individuals who now have an open mind, who are now receptive to the truth, who are willing to let go of the propaganda that has poisoned them. Are they really capable of understanding who God is and what He is offering? It was interesting that this morning I received an email that is a part of a newsletter from a libertarian, and he was touting how the NSA program has been based on lies to support it. And he quoted an article that was posted on InfoWars, which would be Alex Jones' website, where an individual, along with the New York Times and also Ron Paul, in the last couple of days have been cited saying that there is a significant likelihood that the announcement of chatter that was found by the NSA was designed specifically to distract people from the realization that the nation was spying on ordinary Americans and to help to justify the program when in fact none of it was actually true. Now, we reported that reality on this program the day the announcement was made. In fact, within hours of the time the announcement was made, and went into great detail as to how America was being played, that there was no substance whatsoever to this, and made that claim. And it is something now that has been picked up by the New York Times, even by Ron Paul, by politicians and the mainstream media. And so we are making a difference in that aspect of this program. But you know, the difference from God's perspective of someone who is deceived by religion and politics, someone who is allied to a political or religious scheme, a military or economic scheme, and someone who is free of those things but who does not know him, is really the same. At the end of either individual's mortal existence, they will simply cease to exist. And that's where we get right back to what God said in the opening book of his Torah regarding this thing called a nesalma, the thing that makes man unique. We've had all of our political, academic, and media institutions try to kill the nesalma, try to render it unusable. And that is the primary purpose of political correctness, is to keep you from being judgmental, to keep you from exercising good judgment, for you to be willing to accept that which you know is untrue as being true without thinking. You know, for example, if you take the long history of political correctness promoting homosexuality as being not just normal, but beneficial, enlightened, if you will. And you look at the number of people who now agree that it is normal and superior, then you'd see the political correctness being manifest before your eyes. You know, throughout history, homosexuality has been less than 1% of society. Bisexuality, a little more than 1% of society. Collectively, they've been about 2% of society throughout history. But that's not the numbers anymore. It's much greater than that, particularly amongst women. Almost 10 times that number amongst young women who have recently been indoctrinated in today's educational systems and by the onslaught of the media. And so something that is decidedly abnormal has been considered normal. Something that we would normally have shunned, we now embrace. And the only way that that can happen is in a politically correct environment where we're besieged with this notion that you ought not think of things through. You ought to accept things which are obviously untrue as being true. And then we ought to shut down even considering evidence and reason, calling anything that speaks logically of facts and of logic hateful. And so unless those of you who are now in the majority and know that politics and religion, economic schemes and military adventures are the problem, not the solution, unless you're willing to take the risk, and in this society is a tremendous risk of shunning political correctness and exercising good judgment, exercising your nesalma, then you'll be stuck in limbo. So let's return to what Yahowah said and see if more people might be willing to change their perspective on these things. Yahowah Almighty formed for association and accompaniment the man, Adam, from the powdery dust from the small, minute, natural and material particles of the ground, of the earth. He blew into his nostrils a life-giving, this was written in the plural, restoring and sustaining conscience, a nesama. The unique thing that he gave us, a nesama, came from him. Now, this is not something that came from the ground. Our physical bodies, he says, came from the dust of the earth, the material of matter. But this nesama, this conscience, this ability to exercise good judgment, to be discerning, to be discriminating, to understand the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, trustworthy and unreliable, he blew into our nostrils. It came from him. It's not a material thing. And Adam came to exist as a living soul. The Hebrew word for living, che, soul being nephesh. Nephesh is consciousness. All animals have a consciousness according to God, a soul. And then in the book of Job, which is the book that stands out in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms as a referendum on that which is trustworthy and that which is not, that which is good and that which is bad, the book of Job, actually Job in Hebrew, Job means Yahowah's lamb, or and so it speaks of prophetically of Yahowah himself becoming the Passover lamb to resolve this issue. He says, indeed, the spirit, she and mortal man, Enosh, in humankind, and in the nesama of the Almighty, provides understanding and teaches us. So think about that. It is the combination of Yahowah's set-apart spirit and his nesama, his conscience, his seat of judgment, of discernment, that collectively they teach us, they enable us to understand, and only when we understand can we act appropriately. Therefore, based upon Yahowah's definition, we can reasonably conclude that nesama is the thing that makes the connection necessary between information and understanding, between the soul and the spirit. And while it does not make us immortal, it provides us with the ability to know, to understand, to communicate with, to love, to trust the source of immortality. It is the thing that unites us with the source of life, which is why nesama is based on nesham, meaning the process of childbirth. And is the reason why life, as a modifier for nesama, was written in the plural, because it is the very thing that helps us as a mortal soul, the first life, to experience spiritual life, the second life, through the process of exercising good judgment, so that that which we observe and know, we come to understand. Now, the reason that the concept of the nesama, or conscience, the sense of being able to discern between right and wrong, of the concept of justice, of principled morality, of ethical behavior, of the ability to reason and to judge, to be discriminating and thus to choose wisely, is introduced at the very beginning of the Garden of Eden story, is because it provides the fulcrum for everything that follows. Everything that follows is based on the concept of nesama, of us exercising good judgment when given free will and mortal existence. When we do that, good things happen. When we don't, nothing happens. It reveals that the path to God and to life, the purpose of free will, the nature of choice, the difference between good and bad, and the consequence of choosing unwisely is all laid out before our eyes. We can see the benefits of responding appropriately to who God is and what he is offering, and we see the consequence of ignoring him, or worse, rejecting him. Or worse than that even, once rejecting him, leading people away. The Psalm explains that man exists as the shadow, or the diminished likeness of God. You know, if you look at your shadow, it is formed by the light, but it is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional being. We are very much like that relative to Yahowah. We are a physical being trapped in 3.5 dimensions. We have height, width, depth, which makes us infinitely greater than a two-dimensional object. And we are stuck in the ordinary flow of time, which is a dimension, but we are not able to maneuver in it as present Yahowah is. And of course, with Yahowah, his universe has 7 dimensions. Our universe actually has 7 dimensions. We just aren't able to travel or maneuver or understand the 3 that exceed beyond time. So the Nesama helps us understand that we are like God in the sense that our shadow correctly portrays our shape, that we're like God in the sense that blueprints reveal the nature of a building just in fewer dimensions. And the Nesama is one of those things that make us like him because that part of us came from him. And similarly, the Nesama reveals that what is exactly what made Adam unique. You know, we've devoted an entire program to the realization that there were Homo sapiens living outside of the garden during the time not only Adam and Chawah were there, but immediately after the time that they had been booted out. In fact, they had been there so long that they had actually communicated with one another and had begun to establish towns and communities. That's according to Yahowah's Torah testimony. In history, paleontology shows the same thing. And the thing that then made this man, Adam, unique is he was the first man created in Yahowah's image. And the way that he was created in Yahowah's image, he was given something that no other animal was given. This Nesama conscience. That's why it is so vital to our growth, to our knowledge, to our understanding, to our perspective on life itself. This is the operative word of the Torah. It is the word that leads us to the Bereth covenant. And so on this fulcrum, the story of the Garden of Eden will commence in just a moment. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome back to Shattering Myths. This is the first statement regarding God's insights regarding Eden. And before I share them with you, I again want you to appreciate that before God began his teaching, his revelation about what occurred in Eden, and he's the only one that knows what happened there because Adam and Chawah, even Cain and Abel, didn't write anything down. And so we have no way of knowing what happened there other than what Yahowah chose to share with us in his Torah. Now, that being the case, the thing that he introduced this with is that he gave the man conceived in Eden something unique, a nesama. And the reason he shared that, and he is a master communicator, is that it is the very fulcrum upon which everything else he has to say will pivot. Yahowah Almighty planted an enclosed garden in Eden. All right, so Yahowah is God's one and only name, written Yod-He, Wah-He. Been over this turf before, but there's nothing more important for you to know that his name is written in the original Hebrew alphabet as a arm reaching down, forearm reaching out, open hand. That's the first letter of his name. In fact, the Yod, which used to be a Yod, is the Hebrew word for hand. It shows two people representing Adam and Chawah here in the garden, representing Abraham and Sarah, the first to embrace the covenant, representing us, our family, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers. Standing up, not bowing down, reaching up, pointing up, looking up to grasp hold of Yahowah's hand. They stand on either side of a tent peg, which was the symbol in Paleo-Hebrew's script for securing and enlarging a home and adding to things, making them greater than they would otherwise be. That's how Yahowah wrote his name. Almighty is from Elohim. It means that in Paleo-Hebrew that he is a mighty shepherd. He is the one who leads us, who nurtures us, who guides us, who protects us. And he does so hoping that we will stand and walk with him and be reaching out for his hand, being cleansed by him, and enjoying new life. That's what the letters that comprise Elohim convey. It says that he planted, natah. He established, firmly embedded, the seed for an enclosed garden. Garden in Hebrew, there's so many loan words from Hebrew into English. Gan is one of them. Garden is from the Hebrew gan. It means a covered, surrounded, protected, and defended shelter that is suitable for sustaining life. In Eden. Eden is the Hebrew word for delightful, ultimate pleasure, extreme satisfaction, a favorable state of great gladness. That's God's idea of the perfect conditions for us to be together. God wants us to be together in a place of extreme satisfaction and great gladness. So if you want to know what God's home is like, what it will be like living with God should you choose to during the millennial Shabbat, which will begin in just 20 years. If you would like to know what God's idea of perfection is, what he had in mind when he created the universe and authored life, it is defined by Eden. It is further defined by Gan Eden, a place where he surrounds us and protects us, a place where he sustains our life, where there is extreme satisfaction, ultimate delight, great pleasure, and great gladness. You know, you can't worship somebody in that state. You can't be controlled by someone in that state. You will not find a lord there. You most certainly won't find a politician there. You won't find a religious cleric there. You're not going to find an economic manipulator there. You're not going to find a general there. What you will find there is a father, a mother, and their children having the ultimate good time. I had the pleasure of camping out with my parents, and I had even greater pleasure of taking my children on campouts. Very few things in life are as enjoyable And that's God's idea of a good time. If it's your idea of a good time, you're going to like living with God. If it isn't, you probably won't. Now, Gan, which literally means covered in protective enclosure, which is suitable for sustaining life, is from Ganan, which means to surround, to cover, to shelter, to defend, and to shield from danger. There was danger all around the garden. There has to be danger. Life is dangerous. There was dying. There was birth. There were accidents. There was pain. There was suffering. There was opportunities of pleasure as well. But outside of the garden, life was going through its cycle. Death, birth, death, and birth. And God wanted to protect the man that he created in the garden from all of that, and so he created an environment that shielded him. According to the etymological resources, Ganan strongly implies a spirit of care and concern on behalf of those being protected. And therein lies an important key to understanding the garden and its relationship to the festival feast of shelters, the millennial Shabbat, and eternity in heaven, as well as the set-apart spirit. As a reflection of his care and concern for us, Yahweh's set-apart spirit covers us in a garment of light, doing the Ganan thing on our behalf, protecting and sheltering us in God's perfect enclosure. We all have a slice of Ganan, of Gan, when we are born anew into Yahweh's covenant family. Collective Ganan is what we're going to enjoy in eternity and during the millennial Shabbat. But right now we have individual Ganan. The garden is therefore a metaphor for the Mikra of Sukkah, which is a metaphor for the millennial Shabbat, which is a metaphor for eternal life in heaven, all of which depict camping out with God in his sheltered garden. If I convey two things in this program and those that follow about Eden, and the first of those is that you come to appreciate the great gift that God gave of himself to us of a Nasalma, and how it's the fulcrum upon which our lives ought to pivot. The ability to exercise good judgment, to be discerning, to be discriminating, to care about those things that are right and those things that are wrong, to come to understand. And second, that the Garden of Eden serves as a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the nature of the covenant, for the nature of the work of the set-apart spirit, for the purpose of the seventh invitation to be called out and meet with God of Sukkah shelters. It's a metaphor for the millennial Shabbat, which will commence just 20 years from now and last for 1,000 years, where the entire earth returns to a Garden of Eden-like consistency throughout this entire planet. It serves as a metaphor for God's home and living eternally with him, camping out with him. If you look at what happened in Eden, in terms of God walking with man, of God communicating with man, of God teaching man, of God having fun with man, and by man I mean mankind, humankind, then you will understand exactly what God's offering. Everything comes back full circle. God began where he is going to end. This story of Eden is so incredibly important for us to understand because it is a metaphor, tangible, very real in history, of precisely what awaits those who embrace Yahweh's covenant. if you like the idea of camping out with God, if you think that a grand voyage of discovery through His Word and world will be exciting, then by all means, accept the terms and conditions of the covenant and enjoy. In this Gan, the man, Adam, was protected from pain, from work, from disease, and from dying. He was the charter member of Camp Yahowah. One of the reasons that we know that the Gan is symbolic of the seventh festival feast, the Moed Mikra of Sukkah, is because Eden, blissful joy, gladness, pleasure, and delight, is synonymous with both descriptive terms that Yahowah uses in Kara. Kara is the actual name of the third book of the Torah. Kara means invitations to be called out and to meet. That book has been corrupted to Leviticus to depict the attitude and the emotional state of those engaged in the observance of the called-out assembly meeting of tabernacles or shelters, known to Yahowah as the Mikra of Sukkah. There we find that Ashara is a joyous assembly of people who are participants in a festive celebration, or simply partygoers. And Shama means to rejoice and to be glad, to be happy and to express your joy, to be merry, to party, to flourish, to take pleasure in one's surroundings and company, and to celebrate. And so it is Shama and it is Asherah that Yahowah uses to depict life during the shelters, which is very similar to life in Eden. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're considering the terms that Yahowah used to describe really the most important place on earth for much of the first 2,000 years of human existence, this place called Eden. Certainly the first of human existence, it was the most important place on earth. That was replaced ultimately by Yisrael, which became God's metaphor, if you will, for having a relationship with Him. The difference between Eden is it started off perfect, but gave the opportunity for us to reject that exclusive relationship with Yahowah, and Yisrael began in the real world just the way it is today, showing the benefits of embracing Yahowah's teaching and the consequence of rejecting Yahowah's teaching. So it is a much more painful place where choice is red-clawed and sharp-toothed. It should be noted then, as we try to study and glean all that we can learn from Yahowah's testimony, that Eden is derived from ed, which means to repeatedly and continually witness, to provide testimony and evidence. Ed is the testimony of the witness, or the tent of the witness, and the testimony of the witness, all derived from this term ed. Ed is an odd, which are written the same way, just vocalized differently, speak collectively of a future and continuous eternal existence, and of a restoration of life that makes a eternal existence possible, with the ed pronunciation of the word conveying the consequence of witness and testimony. So it is eternal testimony and restoring witness is the very basis of the term. And so what God is saying, if you want to have extreme satisfaction, if you want to experience pure joy, then embrace His eternal testimony and His restoring witness. Now, it's very important that we understand the words that God chose, because now He is telling you how we too can experience the conditions that are portrayed in the Gan Eden. There are very few things as foundational to our understanding of Yahowah's prophetic timeline, or His plan of salvation, than understanding the nature of the Gan Eden, the protective shelter, which is the very place where life as we know it, was made possible in terms of life with God. It provides the one place that provides total satisfaction. The purpose for which we were created is revealed through the story of the Gan Eden. The result of Yahowah's plan of salvation, as it is delineated in the called out assemblies. His 7-step plan to our redemption concludes in the garden. That is where we return. We are currently shut out, and we were booted out. But what God is saying is the symbolism of this garden. There's a doorway back in. The doorway is called Passover. There's a threshold that we cross. It's called unyeasted bread, matzah. And what happens as we go through it, through that door and across that threshold, we become firstborn children into the first family on Bakurim. And then inside, God empowers and enriches us with the promise of his Shabbat, the promise of 7 sevenths. This is the story that God is telling us, and that ultimately we end up camping out with him, which is the end of our journey for those of us who observe Yahowah's and answer Yahowah's invitations to meet with him 7 days each year. This story of the Gan Eden is also the story of eternal life in heaven. It tells you what it's going to be like to live with God forever. It is the story of the Moed Mikra of Sukkah, the festival feast of shelters. It is the story of the millennial Shabbat, where we camp out with God on earth during the last 1,000 years that this universe will exist as we presently know it. At the end of that time, Yahowah, as is presented prophetically to us through the 8th day of Sukkah, is going to create a new eternity, a new universe, this time with us as being witnesses. So all of that is conveyed through this story of the Garden of Eden. Life comes full circle. Mankind is restored and returns to full fellowship with Yahowah. That is the story that we will be pursuing, because it is the story that Yahowah presents in this protective enclosure that sustains life, that is conducive to life, that is satisfying and ultimately perfectly enjoyable. We'll return to Shattering Myths after the news at the top of the hour.